Just like a child can be born into a family's generational wealth, a child can also be born into a family's generational troubles and trauma. And a family's generational wealth most often leads to college and university, where there are libraries like this one, not too far from here, filled with volumes of information and biography. And similarly, a family's generational troubles and trauma most often lead a child to jails, prisons, and penitentiaries, like this one, which looks much like the library that we just saw, and it too is filled with information and biography. My name's Robert Galinsky, and I work in the United States incarceration industry. I work mostly with teenagers in jails and prisons, and much of my work in the past 10 years has been done at the infamous Rikers Island Jail in New York City. And here I am with a few volunteers and colleagues. And more recently, I've gone up the river to Sing Sing Maximum Security Prison, the Big House. And the many kids that I work with and young adults, they have families that are in disarray. So they turn to gangs, where they find acceptance, sisterhood, brotherhood, opportunities, affirmation, protection. And the word gang has a negative stigma attached to it. The word gang, a lot of times, is about being bad, but not all gangs are bad. For instance, my support team, I'm here to tell you, is made up of the toughest gang in New York City that you'll ever come across in any jail or prison. And they're a gang of retired librarians. And they have created a nonprofit called Literacy for Incarcerated Teens, or LIT. This is the toughest, most resilient gang that I have ever encountered. And their mission, their move on the streets, is to support school libraries at collections in New York City juvenile detention centers. And my work is in that area. I enter facilities, I bring volunteers, I bring paper, pencils, decks of playing cards, donated books, magazines to engage my students in the written word and to combat the endless boredom of detainment. And when COVID hit, I could no longer do on-site visits, so I had to shift, and I began doing virtual sessions through Zoom. And with the help of my tough guy gang at LIT, we purchased bundles of books, we ship them to the facilities, we then read them, the students read them, and then we take the time to create thoughtful questions, and then we bring in the actual authors via the internet for question and answer discussions. Here's some of the authors that we brought in. This is the facilities via Zoom. Marina Budos and Mark Aronson, two really wonderful authors. Another one, Cheryl Willis Hudson. Really wonderful opportunity to get the kids engaged. And sometimes they won't even talk about the books. They'll talk about, where do you get your hair done? And some of the young girls that are detained will say, oh, I love your nails. And it's okay. It's okay. It's a conversation. It's about creating some sense of normalcy and whatever their interest is. So after post-COVID lockdown, I was able to go back into the prisons in person. And I'm constantly receiving donations of books. I have friends in a wide network, and they're really giving, and they're loving, and they're always asking, what kind of books do your kids, your students like? I've got a book about accounting. I don't think they'd want that. I'm like, are you kidding me? I've learned that any book, any topic, the wildly wonderful, weird world of teens is an unpredictable one. So bring on the comic books, bring on the carpentry, cookbooks, biographies, books about neuroscience. It doesn't matter. The fiction, nonfiction frontier of teenagers is wide open. Another item I bring in is candy. It's a surefire incentive plan. If you sit with me for 20 minutes or 30 minutes or an hour, we sit down, we have some Skittles, we read, we write, we talk, we battle the boredom with sweet reflections, inflections, and confections. And so then it becomes more of a loving and warm environment when you got a little candy in the mix. So at this point, what I want to do is show you 3 different approaches that fall under what I call leave-behind literacy. Every time I leave a prison or a jail, I constantly leave behind, among other things, paper, pencils, and decks of playing cards. But it bothers me that what I'm also leaving behind is real estate. Real estate, space for words and stories, space for literature on the items that I leave behind. So I decided I'd maximize the real estate. And what I leave in my kids' hands now, I'm going to tell you about through 3 examples of this leave behind literacy. The first example involves pencils. It's what is known as the pencil parable. So a pencil maker was taking the pencils and putting them in the box to send them out into the world. And he told them, there's 5 things that I want you to know before I send you out into the world. Always remember these 5 things. Never forget, you will become the best that you can be. Number 1, on every surface you're used on, you must leave your mark. No matter what the condition, you must continue to leave your mark. Number 2, the most important part of you is what's inside. Number 3, you will be able to correct any mistake that you make. Like I just did with that word, correct. You will be able to correct that. It's okay. Number 4, you are going to experience a painful sharpening from time to time. But you'll need that to become better, stronger, and wiser. And number 5, you will be able to do many great things, but only if you allow yourself to trust to be held in someone else's hands. The pencils went in the box, and they understood and promised to remember what the pencil maker said, and they left with purpose in their hearts. So I keep leaving pencils behind when I leave these prisons. And it bothered me, again, that there's this underutilized real estate, the actual pencil. And I've seen corporate sponsors, customize their pencils with their logos on them. So I thought to myself, I'm going to manufacture pencils that have the parable engraved on them. Leave behind literacy. So I went to a pencil maker, and they wouldn't let me put all 5 on there, because they said if you engrave 5 on there, it's going to weaken the pencils and they're going to break real easy. So we put 3 on, 3 out of 5, not bad. But my kids now, every time they look at that pencil, it's not just a blank yellow pencil. There's a reminder there about how good they can be and what they can do in life. So the second example of some of the work is something I called sticker books. We're utilizing stickers and notebooks. And what you see here are stickers. And some of them, like the middle page there, is dark and gothic, and some of them are sweet and gentle. And the approach with this is to simply put the stickers on a paper in any which way you want. Then you exchange the notebook or the paper randomly, so you don't get the page that you set up. And then we're tasked with crafting stories, poems, and narratives that are connected and linked by the stickers. And so here you can see how this one was blank and how it went to, books can definitely radiate positivity just like coffee, but some souls won't see books as growth, flowering, because they're two-faced and act like worms, dino worms. And this is another one. Randomly, just put it on there and think positive, and please remember to breathe. It's as important as eating vegetables. Tasty lips drip the healthy juice that keeps deadly forces from killing rubber ducky toys and plant life. Think and drink positive. And this last one, it's a little harder to read. A girl likes to see her plants not be sad. She reads without batting an eye. She reads as slowly as a snail these days. But sadly, music awakens her soul, and she dances to growth like the sweetness of a cup of fresh squeezed juice. So these techniques are a lot of fun. They get the kids engaged. They're not intimidating, and they can be used at any level. The last example, third and final example of leave behind literacy, is what I call books on decks. And this involves decks of playing cards. Now, decks of playing cards are really incredible force that foster interaction, engagement, conversation, dialogue, conversational literacy. And I felt guilty leaving behind this very clear real estate, actual paper covered in the image of a king or a queen or a jack. And no offense to any of the Brits in the house, but I scrubbed the king and queen off the cards and took all the symbols off the cards, and I created a deck of cards that had quotes of inspiration on them, hence the idea of books on decks. I turned to a colleague of mine, Dr. Jenny Stepanek, whose son, Matty J.T. Stepanek, wrote a book with President Carter called Just Peace, and I wrangled their publisher, which wasn't easy, into letting me curate 26 quotes from the book, and I made a deal with a company in Florida called Shuffled Inc., who loved the idea so much that they said they would charge me cost. So I customized, manufactured 1,000 decks of cards, birthing the ideas of books on decks. And I think the publishers also acquiesced because they knew that now they had 52 cards that were 52 pieces of marketing for the book. So you can see some scattered cards. I actually made this deck of cards look a little bit dull. I was daydreaming of cool art all over it, but what I've learned is when you go into prisons and jails, depending on the mood of the guard that lets you in that day, if something looks too flashy and cool, they'll take it away from you. So I thought, I'll just go with a very conservative cover and make sure that none of these things get taken. Here's some examples. We use the Joker as the card for the credits and the thank yous. This deck is called Maddie's deck, and here are some of my students working with the cards and enjoying them. This is another program I work with for people who are experiencing homelessness. Any faces that you see in these photos are volunteers. And just as we were going to press, one of my students said to me, "Hey, why don't you make them bilingual?" And I was like, oh my God, what a great idea. And the way cards are, you turn them upside down. So now you've got English and Spanish. One rule that we instituted was that when a hand is dealt, you've got your cards. You got to read every card before we start playing the game. You got to read every card. And then you got to pick one that resonates for you. And you pull that one out of the deck. You have to read it aloud to the group as you're about to play cards. And a lot of times we found that the kids and I would just have these great long conversations, debating and arguing over the quotes and are they real and true and do they resonate? But it was really amazing that these kids jumped in and pulled the cards out. One time I came back into the class and one of my jailed students said to me, "Mr. Galinsky, I was so bored in my bunk last night, laying in bed, that the Ace of Hearts saved me." And I was like, "What are you talking about? The Ace of Hearts saved you? What do you mean?" And he said, "The Ace of Hearts," and he pulled it out. And this quote, "Our attitudes are a choice, our habits are a choice, how we touch the world is a choice." That quote somehow resonated with this kid, and my hopes were fulfilled, that he was not bored anymore. So now I have a number of authors lined up to be in the next production of Books on Decks. And to me, leave behind literacy is just another type of climate change necessary in jails and prisons. So I'd like to feature a student right now that I worked with virtually and in person while she was in jail. She used her time in jail as if it was a library. And she rose from jail to speak at a TEDx stage. And here is her short TEDx talk where she tells the world how literacy changed her life. If you just click on the middle photo, it should bring up the YouTube link.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jenny Erb. My poetry, my writing is who I am. Poetry lets me express myself in ways other than violence. Poetry lets me express myself in ways which I cannot explain in words. Poetry is like my therapist. I write poetry because when I get upset, I get angry and I lose it. And poetry helps me to stay calm. I found myself in juvenile detention for 18 months. And you might be thinking, oh wow, she was in juvenile detention and she's only 17. But I'm just here to tell you that it was not the most greatest experience, but I did learn from it. And I learned how to cope with my anger. I learned that writing poetry helps me to express my feelings in a calm manner other than violence. My motivation is my siblings. I'm the oldest of 4 kids. So I have to show them and guide them to not go down the path that I did. As the oldest, I'm supposed to guide and protect them throughout life. I also have a poem to share with you guys. The sun rises every morning, but not every day does it shine. I wake up and tell myself every day, today's a new day. But sometimes I get stuck in the rearview mirror. Only I can turn my day around, only I. No one else can turn my day around but me. So every day the sun will shine, but only if I choose to let it. Every day is only what I make it, the choice is mine.
I give thanks to the best gang ever, these retired librarians, and to the World Literacy Summit for allowing me to share the techniques and stories. And I want to close with a poem that I wrote, and it was inspired by a young teen who told me, and I use this poem actually as an icebreaker so that they know I'm crazy, just like they are. And this kid walked up to me one day and said, I got in 5 fights today. I got in 5 fights today. I got in 5 fights today. I got in 5 fights. I got in 5 fights today. Owning a bicycle in New York City is murder. I watched a pit bull steal a baby carriage the other day. 2 squirrels mugged an old lady. Wiped my butt, saw a cockroach in the toilet paper. Told me about a boa constrictor. Kicked over a vendor's table. I got in 5 fights today. I got in 5 fights. I got in 5 fights today. This kid, he hit me in the jaw. He make this mark on my jaw. I was standing there with my left hand on his throat tube, popping it in and out like a soda can. My right hand up in the sky, a clump of sun shining through it. And I felt like I was sitting by a fire somewhere, beating it rhythmically, feeding it senselessly. I got in 5 fights today. I got in 5 fights today. Join me. I got in 5 fights today. I got in 5 fights today. 2 guys, 2 other guys, one I showed you. Make this mark. I got in 5 fights. My brother builds machine parts and cigarette filters. Daycare centers have the same enrollment as funeral homes. It's poison in your ass at the public pools. It's poison in class at the public schools. I have a cousin, he's 3. I fought him. Before that was play fights. His head was too little or it would crush. I got in 5 fights. I got in 5 fights. My name means something in the Bible, page 247. Birds have to be tough to live around here. They must be going through some serious changes. Changes like you and me go through. Please, someone flutter through me. Twist my heart to a bumblebee. Let the fuzz, buzz, buzz carry me away. I got in 5 fights today. I got in 5 fights today. It was a 5-fight day. Thank you. I'm Robert Galinsky. Thank you.